Hello and welcome to the Virginia Solar Summit live stream and podcast. I'm your host, Dan French. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. The Virginia Solar Summit live stream and podcast is recorded before a live participatory audience. Plug into the Renaissance, connect with pros, and participate in the next episode on our website, virginiasolarsummit.com/livestream. The Virginia Solar Summit is a diverse community of solar energy, real estate, environment, and economic development professionals, and we are produced in collaboration with a diversity of organizations united by a common goal: to catalyze a solar power renaissance in Greater Virginia that re-energizes our economies, revitalizes our communities, and restores our environment. The collaborative organizations behind the Virginia Solar Summit include Appalachian Voices, the Virginia Department of Energy, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, and the Western Virginia Brownfields Assistance Centers at West Virginia University. We are substantively focused on the development of solar energy, tactically focused on land use and redevelopment, geographically concerned with Virginia and West Virginia, and regionally oriented towards similar solar developments across all of Appalachia and America beyond. We organize a market-making, groundbreaking, and always entertaining event, the Virginia Solar Summit, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one in Richmond, April 26th, 27th, and 28th. I'll get back to that soon. Plug into the Renaissance and learn more on our website, virginiasolarsummit.com. On today's episode, we are very fortunate to have Mr. Ron Butler from Conservatives for Clean Energy, as well as Mr. Skyler Zunk, as you can see there, from the Land and Liberty Coalition. Two busy guys who were sneaking in here at the end of the year, and we're grateful. But before I get to them, we are brought to you by Dominion Energy, as well as Mission Disposal, the essential site services company. And I'll ask all of our folks to mute if you are not muted. Thanks again to our sponsors, Dominion Energy, Mission Disposal, as well as all of our sponsors. You can see here, make sure you check out their website. They're doing this important work to save the planet, revitalize our economies. And I want to make this special announcement now. The Virginia Solar Summit is coming back to Richmond for an in-person event at the Altria Theater, April 27th and 28th, with a pre-party, pre-networking program on April 26th. We are, again, co-hosted by the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, the newly rebranded, formerly known as Virginia Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, Virginia Energy, Appalachian Voices, and the Western Virginia Brownfields Assistance, the Northern Brownfields Assistance Center at West Virginia University. And the big news is that the extra early bird tickets go on sale tonight at midnight. So check back. There'll be, if you're fortunate enough to be plugged in today, you'll be getting a small invite. The national marketing doesn't begin till next year, but we're very grateful for our live audience who's plugging in today, and our dedicated audience who really keeps me at the top of my toes. I want to thank everyone who's plugged in and made this an incredible year despite the pandemic. I don't think we have a smarter audience, a more engaged audience, sending me emails all hours of the night. Keep that up. You make this community thriving and vibrant, and it will make the difference in the future. So thanks to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in person for a lot of networking, active networking, the return of the Solar Exchange, round robin, speed dating. Stay tuned for more. Okay, without further ado, I want to get back to our special guests today, Mr. Ron Butler and Mr. Skyler Zunk. Let me give their bios before I actually bring them on to the show. Again, we are sponsored by Dominion Energy, leveraging innovation for a clean energy future, and Mission Disposal, the essential site services company specializing in day-to-day supply and sanitation needs during solar and commercial construction. Visit them at dominionenergy.com and missiondisposal.com. So Mr. Ron Butler, he's the director of Conservatives for Clean Energy Virginia, and he serves as the state director for the state director, that is. And he's, a lot of folks in Virginia know him. He's a nationally recognized political figure. He's been around for a long time, worked on campaigns since the 80s. And right now he's working to educate Virginians about the benefits of clean energy, along with local conservative leaders. And they're all pushing for this clean energy renaissance, as I like to call it. But for them, it's an important part of an all above approach to energy policy towards energy independence. And Mr. Skyler Zunk, the Virginia Field Director of the Land and Liberty Coalition, a new coalition, active, and they've really hit the ground running, but he's another native Virginian like Ron, And he brings young, but brings a span of government, campaign, and private sector experience to his new role there at the Land and Liberty Coalition. He's fresh out of the Trump administration, where he served under the Secretary of Interior, David Bernard, as special assistant. So he's really had a frontline seat there inside the Interior Department and saw a lot of large-scale energy projects at all phases in development, from Hoover Dam projects to solar projects in the Mojave Desert to oil flats in South Florida. So two guys really plugged in. We're very fortunate to get them both. Let me see if we have them both on the show. Yep, I see them. Sorry, guys, really excited. Thanks for taking the time. I gave you some short bios, but I'd love to first just welcome you to the show. Thanks again. And Ron, can you start, and maybe Skyler afterwards? Can you elaborate on your bio a little bit and maybe explain to the folks what gave you the passion for clean energy?
Sure, Dan. Thanks for having us. I love your energy. It's obviously very electric. I have been working in GOP politics since the 1980s, and moved to Virginia way back then, and worked on hundreds of campaigns in the state over the years. Nationally, I've worked on campaigns from Susan Collins in Maine to campaigns in California and Hawaii. But here in Virginia, my clients from way back have included Governor George Allen, Senator George Allen, Jim Gilmore, Bob McDonnell I worked for. More recently, Jason Miyares, the Attorney General, Winston Sears, my firm, Creative Direct, worked for, and a good number of the members of the Virginia legislature as well. And in January, I kind of rolled off that January of this year, kind of more into a part-time status with the company. And I was looking for kind of some other projects that interested me. And I had served on the board for Conservatives for Clean Energy in Virginia. It was a group that was started here in 2016, 2017. And at that point, as you know, Republicans controlled the House and the Senate. And the goal of the organization was to kind of educate and inform policymakers, primarily at that time at the state level, on the economic benefits of clean energy, what it meant for businesses, how it could be a job creator in the state. And so I was kind of an advisory position on that. So I was familiar with the organization, and they had a transition in leadership. The former executive director or state director left to go to work for another organization. And they called me and asked if I knew anybody that would be interested or good for the role. And I didn't jump in there and say, oh yeah, me at first. I thought about it for the weekend, and I called Andrew Lamar back, who's our kind of the person who does some of the consulting more at the General Assembly level. And I said, hey, I'd be interested in doing that. I think I could use some of my contacts that I've had over the years to spread the message out into places, outside the Capitol, really. And the other thing that we kind of realized at the time, Democrats were in control of both the House, Senate, and the governor's mansion here in Virginia. So what would our role be? What's the role of a conservative in a state that at that time was run by Democrats? And we knew, working with some of our business partners, the solar industry, that they were having some issues on the ground with solar siting, trying to get these projects approved, because there was just some disinformation out there. Energy's become somewhat politicized. So our focus since May, when I came on board, is spreading the message to the local level too, not just to the boards of supervisors and the planning commissions, but to the activists, the political activists at those levels too. So I've spent a lot of time focusing on that. I've done some op-eds in newspapers on the economic benefits of solar, but we couch our messaging from a conservative point of view, from an economic point of view. A lot of the folks on the conservative side aren't as alarmed about climate change as they are on the left. So those kind of messages really don't get a response from them, or at least not a positive one. So it's more the economic benefits of it is what I've been focused on since I started in May. I've spoken at a number of meetings out there at the Board of Supervisor level, Planning Commission level, and we brought Skyler on in July to help kind of with that effort.
Yeah, that's awesome, Ron. Thanks so much. And yeah, come on, welcome to the show, Skyler. And I mentioned that you were there, on the front lines of the Renaissance at the Department of Interior. But for the uninitiated, they might not realize that the Department of Interior is actually doing a lot of energy work.
Yeah, we used to joke that DOI did more energy policy than the Department of Energy itself because of all the energy assets on our public lands out west. But yes, I'm a native Virginian, went to school at Washington Lee, graduated a couple years ago, and went up to work for the Trump administration immediately following that. Got to travel the country with the secretary, see how energy was planned, discussed, and developed at that large scale national level, and really enjoyed it. Got to learn a lot, and certainly piqued my interest. About a year ago, I came back to Virginia to work on a gubernatorial campaign for former Speaker of the House, Kirk Cox. Got to know Ron a bit through that, and absolutely loved engaging across the state with different conservative activists who are supporting the speaker for governor. Ron approached me earlier this summer about this new opportunity to engage at the local level, do energy development type issues in Virginia. And it was a very easy and quick yes. This is phenomenal. I've really enjoyed getting out and talking with landowners, with neighbors, business owners, local leaders, local clean energy advocates, and good old conservatives who want to see economic development happen in their localities, and they want to see their property rights protected. That's another big thing that we talk about here with the Land and Liberty Coalition, is if it's your property, you should do with it what you please, so long as that's not affecting your neighbors adversely. So we launched this past July. I launched a Facebook page, a website, have been very active, getting to know a lot of folks across the state. We're about 5 months in, and we're very much looking ahead to doing even more in 2022.
Hey, congratulations. I know you've done a lot of work. As I said, really hit the ground running, but I encourage everybody to check out the website, check them out on Facebook. You've got some great graphics, some artwork, and putting the memes to work. It's very important to kind of crystallize these things down into kind of chunks that people can understand, because things are changing so quickly. It's 2020, and I think no one alive really remembers what the slow old days by horse and buggy were really like. There's a term I like to use, future shock, which means basically just events are coming faster than the human brain can process. And I think we all suffer that. It's a part of the human condition, left, right, and center. And maybe we've lost some of that perspective. You're coming in at a good time, Skyler. Ron, you go back like me. I'm maybe a little older than I look, or at least I hope so. But I remember the 80s. I have vague recollections of taking solar panels off the roof of the White House. Solar wasn't affordable then, not even close. I don't have a chart that could show solar PV prices and the way that they've been in collapse basically since then. But over the last 10 years, down another 80% just in the last decade. Ron, can you take us through maybe your the story of your life? The journey from maybe the economics of where they were in the 80s. Versus where we find ourselves today.
Sure. When even a few years ago, when the CCE folks came to me trying to get something going in Virginia, I was probably as skeptical as anyone about the economics of it. And I think this was 2016. I had my first meeting with Mark Fleming, who was former staffer for a Republican congressman in North Carolina. And we spent a couple hours talking about the economics of it. And I went back and did some research on it. And he was right that the cost of the panels and the electricity generated from the panels had decreased. The cost of the panels themselves like 90% over the last 15 years or so. And the electricity, the cost of it is comparable to, as you know now, the group on the call knows, to fossil fuel generations comparable to nuclear traditional forms of electrical generation. And I would bet now with the big jump in the cost of natural gas, it's actually the cheapest form of energy, solar and wind together. And I didn't really realize that based 4 years ago. And so I was thinking, okay, if I didn't realize it, and I read a lot, I follow the business news on a daily basis, and there's probably a lot of other folks that have the same perceptions that I had, which is, accurate even now. So, when I found that out, I'm like, okay, from an economic standpoint, this makes so much sense. This isn't, just about a cleaner environment or cleaner air, but this actually makes a business sense to do it this way. And then when you look at the companies in Virginia, about half of the largest company in Virginia have goals to use 100% renewable energy. About half of them. There are dozens more kind of smaller and mid-sized ones who've also had those kind of goals. Microsoft, who has, I think, in Virginia, probably multi-billion-dollar investments in data centers here, have a goal to be 100% renewable energy. Amazon Web Services, the same thing. And right now, the holdup is not in the state law, with state legislation, which with the Clean Economy Act passing, the holdup is really at the local level, with the siting, getting these things approved by the counties. There are, I'm told, 70 plus projects in some stage of planning in Virginia for solar, utility scale solar projects. Some of them are smaller. Some of them are as big as 500 megawatt projects. You all know about the wind project in the Atlantic. That's obviously huge when it comes online, potentially huge generator of renewable electricity. And then there's the project in Botetourt County as well that is still kind of in the approval stages at this point. That will be the first land-based wind generation project in Virginia when that goes through. So from an economic standpoint, to me, it just kind of made sense. Our businesses want it. The state says it's something that's needed, and there's this roadblock at the local level that I think only through education, letting people know the benefits for their community, as well as the state and the world, can we kind of get this through. So that's been my interest in it, just the economics of it, what it means for the localities, because there's a lot of benefits, a lot of tax benefits, a lot of benefits they get from these kind of projects that we try to educate people on that they don't really know.
Yeah, they've really snuck up on us. I want to come back, and I think we might be able to spend 2 hours on all the benefits. We can't presume everybody in our audience knows, because even amongst professionals, it's just a super sophisticated world. We're all, as Adam Smith would probably marvel, how we're super sub specialists now, and it's just really hard to do this kind of cross silo education, even for, no matter how high your IQ is. But Skyler, you're kind of you're making it real. You're going to where the rubber meets the road, county by county. We're kind of tracking your work. Correct me if I'm wrong. You've already gone through 15 or 16 counties in Virginia, meeting with people. So you're collecting some of the most important data. What are your impressions hitting the turf the way you are? Oh, still got you on mute, pal. There you go.
To echo to Ron's concerns, there's just an information gap. So when we're out there talking to folks, they're rightly skeptical. They haven't seen solar generation facilities out when they're driving. They're not aware that solar, to an extent, powers their homes already. And we're just trying to help fill that gap and help them be better clean energy advocates. Ron's right. Solar's now the cheapest form of electricity generation. If you're going to build a new plant of any type, solar and wind lead the way. So it makes that economic sense. And we're trying to tell them, we're not here because there are big subsidies, and this certainly isn't a government program to build these projects. It's private enterprise, private developers looking to build energy generation facilities that are going to power homes and businesses in your area and across the state. These are safe. Think about it. It's free fuel from the sun. We like to emphasize that. They're phenomenal neighbors. They sit quietly in the field. They don't pollute. They really don't do anything but sit there for 40 or 50 years and generate clean, renewable electricity for everybody to use. Most folks don't think about where the energy comes from when they turn on the lights or heat their homes. but it is important that they kind of have an idea that, hey, this is homegrown electricity right in Virginia, Virginia sunlight powering Virginia families. And we do our best to message and make sure that they're aware that this is happening. The costs have come down significantly. It makes sense for individuals to put them on their roofs. It makes sense for communities to allow these projects to go through to power Virginians' homes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so many benefits, other green benefits. Ron mentioned climate change, but one of our feature issues at the last summit was beneficial vegetation. Shout out Monarch Vegetation Services, where, there's great science now. The studies are coming in about what we can do for pollinators, what we can do for all bees and butterflies, and agriculture. There can be, bumps in yields and things like that. So that, they're very much productive from an ecological perspective. And I think we'll see more and more of that as the industry matures, but kind of zeroing back into the hardcore economics, communities are also understanding, early adopters, that especially in small towns where I grew up, maybe they had, these 1 and 2 factory towns across America. Those factories are gone. And some of these big solar projects can become the largest source of tax revenue in the county on day one. Ron, come back in. I mean, there's tremendous direct economic benefit at the local level, of course, from the tax perspective, from the jobs perspective. But can you speak to that, and then maybe look ahead to the economic development and competitive advantage piece?
Sure. The places I think that are adopting this solar early on are in a lot of places the most economically depressed in Virginia. Southside Virginia, Danville, Pennsylvania. They lost Dan River Mills back in 2000. The tobacco market, they had the world's largest tobacco market at one point. That closed up around the same time. They lost 50% of their population in that amount of time since 1980. And they're actually the most open, I think, of any county, any region in the state. Right now, they have a municipal utility that generates electricity for Danville, Pennsylvania, and part of Halifax County. They generate 25% nearly of their electricity from renewable sources. A lot of that is their own. They're not buying it from outside the region. They're buying it from their own facilities. There was a golf course down there that was abandoned, essentially went out of business. Not enough people in the area to keep it going anymore. And they have turned that golf course, they bought it, turned it into a solar farm that generates electricity for the county. It's right there on the city border, so that there's very little cost involved with transmission. So they're using it to generate jobs and economic development for the county. Now, that was even before the General Assembly changed some of the laws to allow revenue sharing for these projects. Previously, a county would get very little revenue from a project like that. And the law changed, I believe, in 2020 that allows them to receive money per megawatt on these projects. And it potentially can generate tens of $millions over the lifetime of the projects for the counties in tax revenue. And that's in addition to the revenue it generates that the landowner gets from the projects. Most of these, I gave you an example of the golf course that the owner of the golf course now is getting rental income from. But most of these are built on farmland, and some of these farms have not been productive for a while, or the owners of the farms are in their 50s and 60s, and they don't have, their younger generation doesn't want to take over the farm. So they're looking at ways to keep the farm in their family and keep an income for their kids and their grandkids to pay for college. And solar, if you rent your property for solar, on average, you're getting $900 an acre for land that they rent. When you're farming, you don't get near that. Sometimes you get $100 an acre for soybeans, I'm told. So it's a huge revenue generator for the farmer. It's a lot easier than milking cows and being out there in the fields every day. So the part of our coalition are these farmers. When we speak in meetings, we get every time we're at a meeting, we have a farmer come up to us, our landowner, and said, "Oh, hey, I want to help you guys. This is really important. This is important for me. This is important for my family." And that's, to me, what's so kind of revolutionary about this. This isn't the government going in through eminent domain and building a gas pipeline all across the East Coast. These are landowners who are saying, "Hey, we want to do this. We want to do this with our own land. We want to be part of this." It isn't even building a giant nuclear plant, say on Lake Anna, where one county benefits. This can benefit hundreds, thousands of people all over Virginia. Really, everybody can get kind of a piece of the revenue from this kind of electricity generation. And I think that's really revolutionary. It really does spread the wealth from one centralized locality where a power generation plant may be, really all over the rural areas of Virginia. And I just think that's going to be incredible if you think about it.
Absolutely. I call it a renaissance. I can't be geeked enough. I've seen the world come a long way from thinking we were running out of oil, and we didn't have commodity prices exploded in 2007-8. As you may recall, we had the Arab Spring because of food price inflation. I think we're seeing some inflation now, but because of the energy superabundance that we're pivoting towards, I think that will help keep inflation in check. I digress, but this stuff it's real money, and yet at the lightest kind of touch. We think about these as big projects, but in terms of the land, these solar panels are relatively lightweight. They're disturbing the land much less than industrial scale agriculture. And it's kind of like the ultimate fallow process. At the end, you're getting, depending on what type of planting, seeding you did, there's more or less soil generation and resting over that time. So when the next generation, maybe the grandkids want to take the farm back at the end of the solar lease, and the land will be ready for them to do, what they will. And it can be part of a big piece of the kind of revenue diversification that we've been, ever since I was a little kid hearing about, how can the small farm stay alive? We need diverse revenue streams. And that's been really hard. Even if you had a few small animals, that's real. You got to get up early, as Ron kind of was alluding to, but the solar panels are just out there. That solar lease is going to come. And it's much more than corn and beans, 2x, 5x, maybe 10x, depending on where you are. So we are talking about orders of magnitude of revenue. It really is pinch me stuff. And maybe that's why it's a hard case to sell. I mean, Skyler, 6 months in, and you're really blitzkrieging around Virginia county to county, to use a bad pun, I guess, with the best of intention. Do these economics, do you have to approach people 2 or 3 times? Or when you start talking about these hard numbers, like Ron's throwing out $900 an acre, does that open a lot of eyeballs?
Well, on the landowner side, it does. And we're engaging with landowners when they're ready to bring their projects in front of the board to help them in that last mile of the approval process. But yes, and that has to be a factor for these boards and planning commissions to consider too. It's people using their private property to make money for themselves, just like a farmer. But we look at other types of development compared to solar. That's what a lot of boards and planning commissioners are thinking about. Well, maybe I would like to see a housing development there, or potentially we could just keep farming it, even though the landowner doesn't want to do so. Potentially we could do X, Y, Z with it. And look at the way that those taxes work with other sorts of development. You're going to be paying more taxes, or the project will be paying more taxes than for it to remain a timber tract or or farmland. You're going to be paying comparable taxes to it being industrial use or housing. This is something that local folks need to consider, and the landowner should have the first and final say on what happens to their own land. This is a great land preservation tool. You mentioned you take these pilings out of the ground, remove the panels. That land is going to be fresh because it has not been tilled, fertilized, and used for the past 30, 40 years, whatever that may be. Consider it as you're taking one timber crop out of rotation for a average 30-year life cycle for pine trees, for a project to to go in. So these are things we're talking about with these folks, that the economics make sense. They also make sense for the community. This is millions of dollars invested into these communities. It creates a good number of jobs while these projects are being constructed. We've talked at length with David Peterson at the Shine program about how he's trying to develop the next phase of a solar installer, solar constructing workforce, homegrown right here in Virginia. And then we've also met business owners who love to see the increased traffic to their communities. When you're bringing in these folks to build these projects, the home market goes up, rental incomes on rental houses go up, apartments are full, hotels are full if they can't find enough housing, businesses are getting more traction, restaurants are selling out, gas stations are selling more, auto parts stores, you name it. So it's truly a tide that's lifting a lot of different boats in these communities. And this is a story that we're trying to get out and get people to appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a shout out to our friends, sponsors of the live stream and of the summit, Mission Disposal. They're one of the local contractors really, putting all the pieces during that construction surge phase. It's very impressive. It sits there as a very unobnoxious neighbor, as Ron kind of alluded to, but the amount of economic activity at the front end is very impressive. And the immediate kind of pump into the local economy is well demonstrated. There's a lot of data about that. I want to get to, we talked about benefits. I want to get to bogeys, but Tyler, you just hit on an issue I wanted to raise really for both of you. I guess I can keep going back and forth and go to Ron first. Property rights. Can we start at zero there? Let's think through. I mean, I can maybe start at the Constitution and build the case for solar, but I think there's a lot of confusion about these projects. At the end of the day, this is economic development. This is a real estate development project, whatever it is. This happens to be solar, but can we walk through, the property rights use case here?
Sure. I mean, obviously, our Constitution, our nation really is based on ownership of private property. It's what separates us from communist countries, from places like Venezuela. And when a landowner wants to do something to improve his life or his family, unless they're impacting a neighbor, the traditions in the United States and Virginia and all over the country have been that they should be allowed to do that. They in these rural areas, they do timber operations on these properties. They do industrial farming. There's hog farms. There's all kinds of things that they use. Basically, they use the land to generate income for themselves. The land doesn't just typically sit there and look pretty for somebody to drive by. They use it. It's part of their livelihood. It's been that since the first settlers came here. And so we look at solar as being just part of this. It's certainly less impactful, as you alluded to, than a lot of agricultural uses of the land. Now, I don't want to kind of overstate that it has zero impact. Any kind of use of land has some impact. When I first moved to Virginia, I was living in Southside, and when I drove by a logging tract, I was a little bit stunned by the way that looked. And they were, hundreds of acres they were clearing there, and they do clearly do that to this day down there. But there is in the construction phase. I mean, it is some of these projects, are hundreds, thousands of acres. That can be jarring to some folks to see, and it does change the look of the landscape until some of the buffers are put up. And I think a lot of the negative reaction people have are responding to that. There are also some situations that you know of where, especially earlier this year and last year, we had these torrential rains, some of the hurricanes that have come through during the construction phase of these problems. And when, something that's this large, you're going to see some runoff issues. Those all can kind of be taken care of, but one project like that where something happens in the world we're in now gets amplified into something much bigger than it really needs to be. I know Dominion and some of the solar developers are very aware of this and really kind of trying to come up with and put plans in these projects that mitigate those kind of concerns. But that's important to kind of acknowledge that when we're in these hearings, in these meetings, that, hey, yeah, there's some impact of it. You don't want to undersell that, but there's that kind of impact with any project that you build. It's interesting to me, like in Mecklenburg County, one of the places that we're working, that's a county where there's a lake, where Lake Gaston is. So there's some tourism, there's some people who enjoy the lake. The other end of the county, farther away from the lake, is there's cities like Chase City that had a lot of manufacturing. They had some tobacco markets, furniture manufacturing, textiles. They're much more economically depressed, and that's where some of these solar facilities want to go in. The town is very, very supportive of these things, but the people who live on the other end of the county really don't care as much about it. You've got Microsoft facility there, multi-billion-dollar data center. They want these solar projects because they want to buy the electricity from them. So even within a county, you'll have one side of the county that doesn't want it, and another that's basically begging for it to come here. And I know they had some projects down there that have had some minor issues, but they're being addressed as they're being built. So there's a balance, but it's just important that the doors stay open, that you don't get these people say, oh no, we had one problem and we can't do this again.
Yeah, I know the state is working very hard on the stormwater issue. Again, there's overlap there with the beneficial vegetation that I mentioned. It really depends on what the natural species, get Mother Nature working for us at some of these sites. And if we're smart about that, it can save money in the longer run. So I think it's kind of solar 2.0 too, right? Like a lot of these first generation projects will just be improved upon. And our smart audience knows we cover a lot of those best practices at our event. We're very substantive. We do a huge knowledge binder every year. We'll do it again in April 27th and 28th in Richmond. We'll get those folks in, and we'll dial in and talk about permitting and those types of things. But another just classical American piece, I think people just don't think about it as applied. And another sponsor of the show, NFP, we have insurance. A lot of these things are covered as part of the contracts. So part of that regular kind of due diligence, these contingencies, we know some of these things, the storm management issues become an increasing issue beyond solar. So the insurance industry is ready for that. So we kind of have a lot of the traditional blocking and tackling that we do in regular old economic development that's being applied here. But I want to give Skyler an opportunity to come back to the property rights issue. And how do you think about that as a younger conservative growing up today? I mean, to me, this is a classic, American land boom, and maybe her best one.
As a younger conservative, I've probably read the Federalist Papers more recently than Ron has. But to go back to those thinkers and the founders of our country, they all thought and knew that property rights were incredibly important. Going back to John Locke, life, liberty, and the protection of property. Thomas Jefferson agreed. They wrote these things into law, into the Constitution, because they were incredibly important. Private ownership of land, it's essential to any capitalistic activity. And that's a story that we love reminding people across the state. Yes, Ron mentions everything has its limits. We've had zoning in the state for many decades, and we have to be smart about where we plan and where we anticipate growth to take place. We're locking up land for 30 years with solar projects, but the default should not be let's ban it and then slowly allow it. We see a lot of people who say, I support property rights, but, and whatever comes after that but is usually why they don't support property rights. And it's tough to say, no, you have to come at it from the angle of this person has owned this land for 50, 60 years, maybe hundreds of years. We're in Virginia. Their families have paid taxes on this land, and it has been their own private property forever. They've done many different things on it, and they might want to put the back 25% of their land into a solar development. Let's start at the default of, yep, let's let that landowner, that caretaker for that land for the last many decades, decide what's best for their land. And then let's zone around the edges and let's come at it at a responsible angle. So that's a hardcore conservative message that we love sharing in all these red counties across the state.
Yeah, and a powerful message. I think it cuts through, and captures the essence, of what we're doing here. And I hope it's, penetrating. And I think it'll get easier as more and more of these projects come online, and people can see the benefits. But we're at this kind of silly stage now, and this is true of just broader politics. So that's my personal opinion. I guess it's kind of silly season all around. Everybody, like the last my whole life, maybe, Ron, everybody's hated the president. I don't know what's going on. Once we just slosh back and forth, and yet, the Renaissance continues to go gangbusters. Now we have Elon Musk with recyclable rockets, and I mean, I don't even know what that's about. But when I say silly season, you guys are also running into a lot of the kind of these misunderstandings I find manifest. I'm on the front lines like you guys too, going to a lot of local meetings, and I run into these myths and these memes. Can we go to the bogeys? What are some of the? So I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't ask in advance, but what are your kind of top three, or however you want to handle top five? Kind of, what are the bad ideas that are road blocking or mind blocking people from seeing the light?
Well, Skyler's got some. I've got a few. One of my favorites is that these are some kind of a Chinese conspiracy. That these are all made in China, and we can't have them here because they're made in China. And the other is that they're going to poison the water, and both of those are pretty easily dispelled. But you get those at a lot of these meetings, because if you Google the internet, you can find that information. How horrible these things are. The truth, as Dan, you probably know, for the utility scale projects, First Solar supplies probably half of the panels for those projects. It's a Ohio-based company. It's a very successful company. They manufacture in Ohio. They do not manufacture in China, smartly because of intellectual property rights. They use cadmium telluride technology in there, and that's if you Google that, you'll find that cadmium and telluride are a toxic metal if you drink them. If you drink a couple gallons of it, you're gonna have an issue with it. But mixed together, like they do, just like water mixed together with hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and water is fine. You don't want to drink hydrogen by itself. It's far less toxic. So what we do is we try to inform people with the facts. That technology that they have, the so-called poisoning, there's been studies, Virginia Tech commissioned one that said that it's just impossible for anybody to be poisoned by one of these. It's the amount of material is so small that it's between a laminated piece of glass. It doesn't leak into a river. It doesn't leach into the soil. It's impossible for that to happen. So we have those kind of materials on our website. We hand them to people. And as far as they're all made in China argument, one, they're not all made in China, and two, I point out that the phone that they have in their pocket is made in China, and the silicon chips in the car that they drove in, the F-150 truck they have, is made in China. And if they were concerned about that, they would be probably going to the meeting on a horse.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe, less so going forward. So we've discovered some bipartisanship. President Trump, we've got a trade war kind of on now, and solar is kind of the tip of that spear. And we've seen, maybe surprising to some, carry over from the Biden administration. We can get back and talk about that. But Skyler, I really want to hear from the front lines, from the trenches. What are some of your favorite myths and memes out there?
Well, Dan, chime in if I've forgotten any, because I've figured out how to respond to almost all of them at this point. But
you're a quick study, my man.
I grew up on well water. My family has a well that we drink from. And many people think that putting a solar panel within the county is going to pollute their wells. Not only is that not true, it doesn't even pollute the ground underneath it. They've looked at panels that have been hit by tornadoes, hail, and hurricanes. Nada. It just does not happen. Property values. I know somebody mentioned that in the chat. People think it's going to tank their property values. That's just not true. look to other states that have done even more solar development than we have, and those property values rise at the same rate than property values in the same locality that are further away from solar installations. People are putting them on their house as a way to increase their property value. Think about that. Some people think that these panels will be broken within 10 to 15 years, or that they have a 10 to 15 year life cycle. Not true. In fact, many of these panels are warranted up to 30 or 40 years. They're continuing to produce electricity, maybe a tiny bit less than they did originally, but they're producing energy for a long, long time, and the companies are willing to put their names behind those warranties. A lot of folks have concerns about, they don't want to build any solar projects because they're concerned about where we're going to put spent solar panels in 50, 40 years. Well, I just mentioned that after 40 years, these things are still producing at about 80% of the original electricity that they did on day one. So they're still going to be producing electricity. And I could see a lot of these companies leaving those existing panels in the field if they're still creating electricity every day. Leaders like First Solar, like Ron mentioned, recycle these panels and have set up an entire business to do just that, because this raw material is so valuable. Why not use it again? Why not refresh it, recycle that glass, recycle some of those photovoltaic materials and use that again? People aren't asking, well, when my car is not working in 20 years, what am I going to do with it? That they're never citing that as a reason not to buy a car. We should be smart about how we talk about recycling these panels at the very tail end of their life cycle. That's something that we're openly advocating for, and hope more leaders show up in this space to recycle these panels, because it's a huge business opportunity. We're just 40 years away from that opportunity in most cases. So did I miss any miss there?
I see one from the chat, and I wanted to, if folks have questions, go ahead, start dropping them in the chat. We are going to turn to questions, but one we've got here. What about the idea that solar's taking up all the prime farmland?
We've actually had a meeting with the Farm Bureau to talk about this and hear some of their concerns about what this might mean further on. The fact is, many of these installations are happening on land that's not being farmed currently. Some of these installations are happening in brownfields. Some of these are happening where we're currently growing trees. I could see a concern if we're taking up many percents of prime farmland, but that's not as much land as we need to meet some of our clean energy goals. And certainly not something that I think is going to be affecting farmers. I would listen to the farmers' voices when talking about prime farmland. If they're too old and can't farm it anymore, is it going to become a housing development, or will they put it into a solar project?
The other thing about farming too, Dan, is that we're now able to produce more food on less land than we ever have before because of technology. Partly, some of the is being growing indoors now, so we don't need as much farmland as we used to need to feed the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to quickly counter that it's not farmland lost; it's farmland fallowed. Full stop.
Correct.
So it's coming back, or it can come. The landowner will have the option to kick it into a new solar farm lease, or bring it back as organic farmland, which it will be. And my other favorite stat is, so, by 2035, if we go by the new Biden administration's math, that's a terawatt. Let's say by 2035, that's about 5.7 million acres of land. That's only 0.3% of all US land. So we can triple that to get to the 3 terawatts by 2050, which is still less than 1% of all US land if we go that way. So, even at scale, solar, we're talking about maybe 1% of all land in the United States. And as Skyler rightly said, my favorite, as an old brownfield guy, a redevelopment guy, there's a lot of previously developed land that's perfect for solar. It's got the infrastructure and the connects in place. And our audience is also very smart with that. We've had redevelopment as a feature issue many times. We've got some great mine land folks at Virginia Energy with whole programs, and they're always reminding me that they've already identified 125,000 acres of mine land in Virginia, just in Virginia, which is that will satisfy a huge chunk of the land that the Commonwealth needs to go solar. So reach out to Daniel Kestner at Virginia Energy if you have questions about mine land redevelopment in Virginia, one of the best programs in our laboratory of states. And I'm very, very happy to see the Commonwealth leaning forward on that redevelopment, because that's where a lot of the memes that we've already mentioned, those arguments just really don't make sense when we're talking about these lands that have been previously disturbed. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Skyler, there's a question about the Virginia Tech study on the cadmium telluride panels. That's on the website, right? Would you give the website where we put that safety information on there?
Yeah, we've linked it on our website. That's landandlibertyva.com that you can go to, and we've linked that study there.
Yeah, and I want to give you a big plug to your safety page, which I think is great. You drill right into the safety issue, and I think it's fantastic. So let me get to questions now. If I can hang on a sec. I can't get to my questions. Oh, can we go through some of the specific issues with siting agreements that we're seeing at the local level? Ron, maybe let me start with you. What,
Skyler, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Skyler. Yeah.
Yeah, every county is wanting to get its best deal when they're making these long-term commitments for these lands. And I think every county is different and every project is different. And I've seen developers try to engage with counties to, get a deal that works best for both parties, one that can still keep a project economical without pushing it too far one way or the other. I know counties are starting to talk and compare notes about what siting agreement language looks and what is a good deal for this county and what is a good deal for this county, and making sure everybody's not getting gypped. Yeah, I know a lot of those conversations happen behind closed doors between developer types and county leaders, and I haven't been behind those closed doors, but they are able to get a really phenomenal payment to the counties for each of these developments that come through, and counties are smart to take those tax dollars and spend them wisely. We also emphasize these are tax dollars that are coming to your county, and we're not asking you to school any of the children who you would have to school if this were a housing development. We're not asking you to build new roads or build new bridges like you would have to if it were in almost any other type of business. We're not asking you to build new sewer lines or infrastructure at the taxpayer expense. This is money that you can put to build a new school, pay for public services, first responders, etc., or lower taxes on your constituents. As conservatives, that's our default, is why don't we ask our citizens to pay less, and we can find the money elsewhere. So we're encouraging folks to talk about those things, think about those things when they're engaging in siting agreement discussions.
Dan, and the restrictions that they try to put on some of the counties that are more anti-solar, they'll have limits saying, okay, you can't have more than 200 acres per project, or they'll say a project has to be located 2 miles from another project. And what the cumulative effect of all those restrictions are, it makes the whole project not economically viable in the county. As you know, or your audience may know, that you have to be close to a major transmission line for these things to really make sense. So the thought that we hear this sometimes, oh, the whole county is going to be covered up with these. That's almost never the case, because most counties don't have transmission lines in the entire part of the county. Pennsylvania County is Skyler just says, is almost as big as some of the smaller states there in terms of land area. but there are only certain parts of the county where it makes sense for there to be solar. So what some of the more sophisticated counties have done is they've looked at those transmission lines and said, okay, here's in their comprehensive plan, here's the solar overlay district. This is where solar is efficient, where we can do it. We're not going to have these arbitrary rules like a 500 or a 100 or 50 or a 2 miles between. This is where it makes sense. And they know that the rest of the county probably will never have it because there's no infrastructure to get the electricity to where it really needs to be in those counties. So, but some of them who are, and these are primarily some of the counties closer to Northern Virginia, where you have some wealthier people who put up these fronts on why they don't want it. They'll come up with these sophisticated ordinances that have 2 mile limits, this limit, or you can't be next to this thing or that thing, and it essentially eliminates any opportunity to do solar in the county. And that's their goal on some of these. They can't ban it. It would be illegal to put a moratorium on it, but they come up with these restrictions that effectively do the same thing. And they haven't been challenged legally on it, but that may change in the future.
Yeah, it's an important point. My family left France in 1066, but it's lovely. The French model. Let's pass a new law, to kill it. You guys both said a lot of great things there. To come back to the siting agreement, just to add, I mean, one of the things I've never seen before this year was a provision in there about workforce requirements. Thou shalt not source from any country that's abusing its labor. So that was about the Uyghurs in China. And I heard that was a kind of a late stage, last minute addition by the community too, to put into get into the agreement at the end. And then the other, more on the positive side, and there is a lot of opportunity here. Locals rule in the law. It goes back to Magna Carta and the common law. And on real estate, the locals can have some flexibility, and you can use it very positively and prescriptively. One of the things I'm seeing are these pollinator ordinances, or ordinances for beneficial vegetation. If you're going to come in and do solar, do some native species for us, or maybe not your entire solar development, but let's do a piece for the butterflies and bees. And I think some of those things approached constructively can be well received by solar developers. And so watch this space. Each one of these projects is going to be won and lost one at a time, and community by community. Very grateful for the work that you guys are doing. In the time we have left, we've got some more great questions. I think we're sensitive to the top of the hour, but I know we maybe have some bonus time if our gentlemen can stick around. One of the questions I wanted to get to was for both of you guys. Can you talk about maybe emerging tech in building materials as an economic option versus, say, ground-mounted solar? Can you maybe look beyond solar to clean tech? Go big for us, guys. Think about maybe we talked about the success of all the innovation to get us to this point, but it's not going to stop. So what will the next 5 and 10 years look like?
I see Speaker Pollard put that question in there, and certainly appreciate the question. We're really focused on utility scale in rural Virginia, but personally, I've been following the technological advances that have been brought to market. A lot of folks are looking at building materials like shingles that are solar panels themselves, and energy efficiency is something that we also like to talk about. That's a really good ratepayer cost savings chat to have with a lot of these folks, but I'm not terribly familiar with that stuff yet.
Hey, Dan, I see a speaker's a friend from church, so I want to answer his question
Awesome.
on here on decommissioning. There are in most of these solar agreements now, decommissioning rules put in there. Often bonds are placed, so when the project is done in, say, 30 or 40 years, there's funding so they can be disposed of, and in some cases, there's stipulations for recycling. I know there's some concern that we don't want to be stuck with what to do with 1,000 acres of solar panels, but that's usually handled in the agreements now when they're written and agreed upon with the county.
Yeah, as Skyler said earlier, there's tremendous value in those panels, whether we strip them down and for the materials later on, or we just straight up recycle the materials. Maybe in 30 years, we'll be able to sell them to some northern latitude or maybe some other developing country where they don't have any solar, sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere where that 80% efficiency will be fine. And then the future value of like if it is a productive solar farm, the future value of those renewable energy watts will have tremendous value. And bridging, I think, to Speaker Pollard's last question, how do I see the future? I mean, we're going to need Elon's new Dragon scale rooftop solar. We're going to need utility. We're going to need wind off the port. We're going to need everything because the drones are coming. I think there's a lot of electricity demand that's coming. We're going to electrify the fleet. No more. The days of the internal combustion engine are nigh. We're going to need a lot of juice, gentlemen. There's a lot of electricity generation that we're going to need, and tucking it in everywhere. I think, as many of your wonderful materials say, we need this all of the above approach to energy.
Yeah, that's right. We always say we support an all above approach to it. I think the electricity needs are going to increase by 50% in the next 50 years. And you have to have a lot of different diversified sources in order to meet that. I think it's foolish to rely on, say, just natural gas by itself, or solar by itself, or wind by itself. I think a diversified approach that includes nuclear in the portfolio. I think the new modular nuclear facilities are going to be more of a bigger part of the electricity mix. I know the Biden administration supports those. Republicans have typically been supportive of those. Just the needs with just the data center alone that are coming on, not even counting the electrification of cars or the commercial office spaces. We're going to need a lot more production than the average people realize right now.
Yep. And I know our friends at Dominion, dominionenergy.com, I mean, they're taking it seriously. Nuclear too. The next gen nuclear stuff looks great to me as an amateur scientist, super safe. We're going to need them in space to power the new stations and all this. And so a little nuclear is going to help. And I think the great news is that all these projects are coming in the window of economic viability. And that's when America is at her best. Skyler, did we miss anything? Do you have any, did I miss any questions, or did you want to jump in on that point?
I don't think so. Thank you for having us. We certainly enjoy sharing our message with more folks outside of our typical one-on-one and Board of Supervisors Planning Commission conversations. I hope to meet many of your viewers out on the road as we're traveling across the Commonwealth and working on these issues where the rubber meets the road. So thank you very much for the platform. Again, we're on Facebook at Virginia Land and Liberty Coalition, and have a website launched, landandlibertyva.com.
Yeah, thank you, Skyler. We got your contact info up on the screen and your logo there. It's a great website. I encourage everybody to check it out. And Ron, let me throw it to you kind of for final thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Dan, for having us. I know there's some concerns among some folks about the environmental impacts on some of these things, but I think that can be dealt with smart planning, with cooperation between Dominion, the developers, and the localities. I think that the overall benefits far outweigh the negatives, but the negatives can be reduced too, whether that's bigger buffers, runoff, those kind of issues. I don't want to just discount them and say, oh, that's not important, because it is, but that can be dealt with, just like we've dealt with cleaning up our rivers and our smokestack pollution over the years in this country. Technology will help with that.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. Again, I encourage everyone, cleanenergyconservatives.com, and there's a Virginia specific page for cleanenergyconservatives.com/states/Virginia, and Tyler's website, again, landandlibertyva.com. Everybody check that out. And I'll just go out like this again. We've got extra early bird pricing tonight at midnight for the next Virginia Solar Summit in person. It's a market making event. We're going to have landowners on one side of the table and solar developers on the other. We're going to have billions of dollars in the room. We're going to be building the next generation of solar projects in Virginia, in West Virginia, and the region beyond. Last time we had some folks from Europe plug in, and I know that they're going to be coming back because that's how hot Virginia is. The #1 place to do business. There's bipartisan agreement. I want to thank again Skyler and Ron for the work that you're doing, for being in the public arena. You know, it's not easy, but somebody's got to do it. I'm super grateful to have smart gentlemen such as yourselves engaged in this work. I think it's getting easier. The future is as bright as we build it, and thanks to you, it's that much brighter. So thanks again, Skyler. Thanks, Ron. Thanks again to our live audience. Stay tuned for a limited edition email coming out, and watch next year for big announcements for the next Virginia Solar Summit. Thanks again. Keep up the good work out there. The future is bright.
Thank you.
See you guys. Great job.
Yeah.